And I am so thrilled to be here. And I thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I don't know who wrote it, but it was absolutely wonderful. And I'm so excited that Roger DeWitt's here. I love him. He's terrific. No, it was so nice to meet you, you and Joni, and I've known Andrea for 100 years. Actually, I'm not 49. I'm actually 57. I'm a 49-year survivor of the entertainment industry, although I look 49, don't I? Aren't
Yes.
I? Aren't I? I'm a pretty girl, mama. I am thrilled to be here. And I want to share with you my love for positive psychology. And the thing that I hope that you walk away with this from this presentation, other than Roger's so terribly handsome. Um, my other hope is that you walk away with an understanding of the two sides of psychology and the tendency for, because ADHD um, is considered a disorder, that we tend to look at only half of the side, the issue around ADHD. And I think positive psychology is an incredibly important complement to understanding the ADHD brain and helping to ignite it. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'll be right back. Please hold. How are you spelling share screen? I'll be right back. There we go. Okay, and share. Um, so, positive psychology, an essential component to ADHD thriving. Um, where we're going to go today. First and foremost, oh, actually, no, wait, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I wanted to ask you guys something because I'm just really curious, and I'd love to, you can jot it in the chat if you wish. I would love to know who's here for themselves or who's here for another adult or who's here for a child or all of the above. And if you could just go into the chat and just so I get a sense of, are you ADHD? Are you here because your spouse is an ADHD? Or are you here because your whole family's ADHD and they're yelling in the background? High school students, great. Child. I'm going to be wearing my granny glasses. Aren't they sexy? Spouse is ADHD, grandchild potentially ADHD, son, whole family except me. Oh, there's an island. Sorry about that, Laura. Myself and teenage son, child 9 years old, 30-year-old son. Great, cool. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to have you do something in the chat one more time in a bit. So now let me go back and share my screen. It's the big button, Grandma. All right, here we go. All right, so let me tell you where we're going today. We're going to divide this into three sections. First and foremost, we're going to talk about, do a short section, what is positive psychology? A lot of people have a misconception. A lot of people think they know what positive psychology is. Unfortunately, with positive psychology, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And so I'll give you a little bit of the history rundown on what it's about, how it's started, because I think that's super, super important. I'm going to do a little primer or reminder about the basics of the ADHD brain wiring. Those two are the precursors to why ADHD and positive psychology fit so beautifully together. And then I'm going to take a positive psychology theory and show how positive psychology helps the ADHD brain to thrive. And if you're not sick of me and ready to throw me out the window by then, we'll take some Q&A time at the end. All right, so what is positive psychology? And I'd love for you to put this in the chat. What do you think of when you hear the term positive psychology? Strengths-based, using strengths. That tells me that David Gewerk was here. Reaching potential, getting rid of negativity, positive reinforcement and using what you're best at, studying what makes and keeps people well, supportive redirection. Okay. All right, those are pretty good answers, folks. Those are pretty good answers. Let me share with you a couple of things that what positive psychology is not. Positive psychology is not happyology. It is not The Secret or visioning things and having them come to you in a woo-woo sort of way. It's not classic positive thinking. It is not ignoring the negative. It is not sticking your head in the sand and being an ostrich. Positive psychology is a balance. It is not. In fact, Marty hates the word happy, happiness for many reasons. I'll explain why in a second. Um, Positive psychology is the scientific study of what enables individuals and communities to thrive. Okay, so Martin Seligman, this is a quote: "Psychology is not just the study of weakness and damage; it's also the study of strengths and virtues. Treatment is not just fixing what is broken; it is nurturing what's best in us." All right. So, for good or for ill, ADHD is associated with the medical model, and the medical model is that we fix what's broken, we heal illness. But here's the problem. Eliminating illness or bringing people to homeostasis does not necessarily mean that the person is in flourishing health. And so that's where positive psychologies come in. And now I'm going to share with you a little bit about the history of a little tiny bit of the history of psychology and where positive psychology fits into that bigger picture. All right, so this is pre-World War II. So a man by the name of William James, who's a philosopher and is considered the first real psychologist, in the early 1900s, he authored the first psychology textbook. And he's very famous for saying, "My experience is what I agree to attend to. Only those items which I notice shape my mind." And this becomes really, really important. If you've ever heard anybody say to you, what you pay attention to grows, that's the core of it. And because ADHD has such a limited reservoir of attention, where we place our attention is incredibly important. Now, keep that in mind as we move forward. All right. The positive side of psychology was kind of studied early on. Freud, everything was geared towards reducing anxiety, and Abraham Maslow talked about his hierarchy of needs, and the humanistic psychology looked at some of the same things that positive psychology looks at. But the problem with that was that during that period of time, it was clinically based. So not everybody they weren't doing any studies of what they were observing in the clinical world. Fast forward now to World War II. All right. There was a huge number of soldiers that were coming back from the war with incredible emotional and physical damage. Okay, so psychologists were being called on to focus and heal the illnesses, heal the mental illnesses that all these soldiers were coming back from. They wanted to alleviate the suffering of the mental illnesses. They were not so concerned with flourishing health. They were just trying to keep them from being mentally ill. All right. The Veterans Administration and the National Institute of Mental Health had a huge call for psychologists to start studying mental illness. And so all the money for research was going into the study of mental illness. And so and boy, they did a great job, because we do a really good job with remediating mental illness. But what happened is there was no study of what's best in people. Little was done to really foster or explore what it means to help somebody who is basically well thrive. So in essence, psychology was focusing all of its energy, 100% of its effort on 50% of the problem. It was bringing people from -10 to 0. But if you're at 0, that doesn't mean you're thriving. That doesn't mean you're flourishing. And so enter now Martin Seligman. So Martin Seligman's probably best known for his discovery or theory, coining the term learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is when that you realize that nothing you do will have an effect, you stop trying. So the baby elephant in the circus, that when their baby elephant are tied to a stake and they can't pull it out, over time, they learn not to try. So you have this giant elephant now who has this little tiny stake. They're tied to it. They could snap it in half, but they don't. They never try because they learned they couldn't do any difference. And so Martin Seligman had a daughter, a 5-year-old named Nikki. And Marty's a big gardener. And so he was out in the garden and he was planting his flowers and doing some work. And Nikki was out there and doing what kids do, playing in the dirt, tossing things around. And he snapped at Nikki. And Nikki threw her little shovel down and ran back into the house. And she came back and she looked at him. She goes, "Daddy, I want to talk to you about something." He goes, "Yes, Nikki." She says, "Daddy, when I was 5 years old, I gave up whining." He goes, "Yes, Nikki, you did." And he says, "And that was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do." She goes, yes, it was." He says, "Daddy, if I can give up whining, you can stop being a grouch." And it was in that moment that he realized he had this epiphany. And he realized that the role of a parent was not just to correct the child's faults, but was also to nurture and magnify their strengths, help them to orient around them, and thus buffer them against their weaknesses. So in a very real way, when we magnify strengths, when we magnify what's working, a good deal of the expansion of that will take up the space that is being taken up by the weakness. And this is the thing that's so critically important for people with ADHD. Keep that in mind as well, right? In 1998, Martin Seligman was elected the president of the American Psychological Association. And every president has to have a mission. And he was very, very concerned about the direction where psychology was going. And so his mission was the reorientation of psychology to include the empirical and scientific study, as well as the articulation of what it means to have well-being and what it is to help individuals, institutions, and cultures thrive. And in that article, he announced that he had formed a network of 18 scientists in different disciplines to lead the way. And that included people like Barbara Fredrickson, and her work on positive psychology. And if you haven't read the book, Positivity or Love 2.0, they're fantastic books on positive emotion and the benefits of positive emotion. Ed Diener, who just passed away, and his work on quantifying the measurement of well-being and what it is for each individual and how you can measure it. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and his work around flow. So these luminaries came together, and they actually went down. I think it was just a cheap way to get to take a trip to Mexico, and they ended up going to Puerto Vallarta and at this big resort, and they got together to discuss and talk about what this new side of positive psychology would look like. Meanwhile, a man by the name of Neil Mayerson, who is a psychologist and a very interested, and a philanthropist, and very interested in positive youth development. He came to Marty and he said, "You know what? I want to find a positive youth development program that we can put our stamp on and roll out nationally." And so they organized a week-long seminar where people would come and they would present their programs for youth development. And at the end of the third day, they looked at each other and they said, well, this is all great, but we don't know how to define what it is that we're talking about. What is best in people? What is it that makes people, that allows people to thrive? And so they started a discussion and a research around character strengths. What is it that is great character? And Chris Peterson led a team of 55 scholars who did a historical review of over 2,500 years of psychological, theological, and philosophical writings to articulate across all cultures, to articulate what were the universally valued as what is best in people. And they came up with 6 virtues. Those virtues are wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And these were all both universal and cross-cultural. And as they expanded their research, and this is my favorite part, they went to include greeting cards, popular literature, tombstones, obituaries, and my absolute favorite, and then you learn a lot about me when you hear me tell you that this is my favorite, they examined the Klingon code as part of this discussion about what is virtuous. And they came up, the results were 24 character strengths that are measurable, universal, effortless, essential, and joyful to use. I know David has talked to you, I think, last month about character strengths. I could talk for hours on character strengths. I think it's so important. But that was the foundation in what's best in people, the character strengths. Now, there's a problem. When we talk about happiness, though we're going to use that word sometimes, it's not really a thing. Happiness is not something that we can quantify or research. So instead, they move towards an articulation of emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Okay, emotional vitality, happiness, satisfaction with life. That's the emotional part. The psychological part, competence, feeling like you can do things, autonomy, being able to make choices for yourself, self-acceptance, purpose, growth, positive relationships, and then social well-being, the positive attitudes towards others, belief that social change is possible, belief that you contribute, that you are part of a community, and that you matter. And there's a whole study in positive psychology on mattering, and mattering being feeling valued and providing value. And so this was as they began to do this research, these were some of the things that were coming out of it. And Martin Seligman came up with his version of what cultivate and fosters flourishing and well-being, and that's PERMA, and that's positive emotion, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and achievement. Some people add a V to that in terms of vitality, physical and physical vitality and health. He did not initially add that, but he's open to that, and that's where we are now. I'm going to take that PERMA, and at the end, I'm going to use that as an example for how ADHD is. We can marry the two with psychology and positive psychology and ADHD. And so this brings us to today, 20 years later. So positive psychology research has been conducted and continues in fields like education, neuroscience, public health, economics, healthcare, government, management, organizational scholarship, leadership, youth development, and a host of others. There are programs, master's degree programs and psychology and PhD programs that are centered around these topics. I just graduated from the Master of Applied Positive Psychology at UPenn. There's one in Europe. It's exploding. The goal being to put positive psychology practitioners in every arena. And so I was sitting next to a teacher. As an ADHD coach, I was sitting next to a teacher. There was an FBI guy. There was somebody who worked at Microsoft. There was somebody who worked in healthcare, and so on. And that's where positive psychology is to this point. All right. So that's kind of a rough understanding of what positive psychology is, as well as the history of how we got there. Now, this next part's going to be a slight review, but I think it's important. This is an ADHD primer, all right? ADHD, we know, is a challenge. It's got deficits in its name. Unfortunately, it's defined by its challenges, all right? I want to give you some important things to think about as we look at ADHD, all right? Our definition of ADHD for tonight is going to be the ADHD brain is a brain that is uniquely wired towards interest. Okay? Think about that. The ADHD brain is uniquely wired towards interest. A neurotypical can force their attention. It's much more difficult, near impossible, for that to happen with somebody who has ADHD. Now, in order to understand this, we have to define interest. So interest is anything that stimulates the cerebral cortex, positive or negative. So what does that mean? That means a great hobby, a fascinating video game, a wonderful book, a terrific television show. It also means anxiety, stress, worry, frustration. All of those things will stimulate the brain. And if there isn't something that will steer us in a positive direction, our brain will start to go towards whatever is readily available. Because the brain doesn't make a distinction between positive and negative interest. It only wants stimulation. Okay, so that's part one of this, of our definition. The next thing that we need to talk about is situational variability. Okay, situational variability is why ADHD reacts differently in different situations. And here's building on the interest factor. If interest is high, in general, ADHD traits tend to be low. However, if interest is low, ADHD traits tend to stay high. If interest is low, ADHD traits tend to be high. All right. So please do not ever, because of this situational variability, this is what makes ADHD such a mind screw, is because how many times have you or somebody you know said to an ADDer, you can pay attention to these damn video games. Why can't you pay attention in math class? You're not trying. It's one of the most unfair things to say to somebody in ADHD, because if you don't understand situational variability, you don't understand how ADHD works. Now, here's the problem. If you're an ADDer and you don't understand situational variability, and you can't mine and understand the energy or the interest that you're getting in a particular situation, then what's going to happen is you're going to go and say, well, I paid really close attention and I was really, really focused here, and I'm not focused here at all. What's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. I'm broken. And there we go into the negative. All right. To further compound matters, folks, we have a propensity towards negativity bias. So what is negativity bias? Negativity bias is the propensity to look for what's wrong and for what's not working. People give greater weight to negative events, objects, and personal traits. Baumeister has called it bad is stronger than good. Rosen and Roisman, they actually coined the term negativity bias. Okay, so in this case, then, the evolutionary advantage of this is I go out of my cave, I look to the left, I look to the right, I'm on edge, I wait for the tiger, I see the tiger, I fight the tiger, or I run away from the tiger, or I hide from the tiger, fight, flight, freeze. Now that's great when it comes to the evolution. It's not so great when it's a human being who doesn't have a tiger chasing them. All right. So where we move our attention we have to be aware that we, in addition to all of the other things, we have to be aware that we have a propensity towards the negative. And there's incredible ramifications for this for people with ADHD. In order to create a memory, you have to be able to pay attention and process it. More often than not, because people with ADHD are so focused on what they can't do, that they don't pause to pay attention to what is working. They don't pause to pay attention to their successes. They're so, and it's, it's valid. I mean, they want to improve their weaknesses, but they're so focused on their weaknesses. We are so focused on our weaknesses that we don't make the memories of success. So now we're going into our daily life without memories of successes that we have at the ready. And that can lead, that's just disastrous. So we've got negativity bias, we've got situational variability, and the people who don't understand that in our life. And we've got a unique wiring towards interest that can take us in all sorts of directions. So this is an incredibly challenging state for us to be in. Now, I teach at the ADD Coach Academy, and I got permission to share this with you all. It's called the I model. And this is something that I'm going to share with you that I encourage you all to think about in terms of this orientation now, as we start thinking and begin to orient towards this brain as a unique interest wiring towards interest. Here's what happens. So let's start, this is the baseline. Interest is coming in. And it's going to take our focus in any direction. So it might be, I'm really interested in the subject I'm studying, and that interest is coming in, and I can focus and pay attention. Maybe I'm not so interested in it, and the interest of instead of studying for finals, cleaning the kitchen. So all of a sudden, that becomes really, really interesting. The interest then is coming in. Now, one bit of interest is positive and task-oriented, the other is not. Maybe it's video games, maybe it's anger, we have to be able to pause and align that interest with a powerful intention. All right. So we have to be able to pause long enough to notice the interest that is coming in, measure it against a powerful intention. And if the interest that is coming in is in alignment with that intention, it will move us in a direction and ignite our motivation and energy. We will be able to inhibit impulses. And over time, the more we align with that powerful intention, the more we will be able to be guided by that. All right. And that, I'm going to go back to the character strengths. Character strengths are those strengths that we have, and they're core to who we are. And those strengths that David talked about to you last time, those core character strengths are essential to who we are. They're us at our best. And the more we align with them, the more we are allowing that intention to guide us and move us forward. All right. I know I'm giving you like this slam into the basics of this kind of theory that we teach at the ADD Coach Academy, but I think it's important to understand this as we then go into the next step, which is looking at a positive psychology example. We're going to hold off on any questions until the very end, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions anything that's not clear. And just so you know, I know I'm doing a lot of talking. I know there's a lot of stuff here. It's being recorded. So if there's something of interest or something that you didn't get, you can bring back to it at a later time. Buster? No, that's enough. Sorry, my dog's in here with me. The joys of working at home. All right, great. So now let's look at a positive psychology example. We're going to use the PERMA model. And here's the PERMA model. Marty talks about flourishing, and the pathways to flourishing is through increasing positive emotion, increasing engagement in what we do, and engagement with positive relationships, increasing the meaning in our life, and marking well our achievement. Okay. So let's start with positive emotion and let's look and see. Remember, ADHD is uniquely wired towards interest. So now let's look a little bit at how each one of these boost interest and potentially help us inhibit impulses and stay in line with who we really are. So in positive emotions, the lead researcher right now in positive emotions is, as I mentioned earlier, is Barbara Fredrickson. She has identified the 10 positive emotions that we most commonly experience: joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, and awe and love. And she, in her new book, her most recent book, Love, she sees as the master positive emotion with which all of the others fall under. There's a really important positive emotion here. I don't know if you noticed it. It's on the first one in blue on the second list. Notice that interest is one of these 10 positive emotions. If we look at this interest, what we find is interest not only feels good. All of these, one of the things about a positive emotion is they all feel good. The thing about interest is interest ignites. When we are in a place of interest, we feel like doing something. Okay, so here's some of the research on positive emotion and increasing positive emotion. Increasing our positive emotion and experiencing more of it increases resilience. It fights depression. We recover from setbacks faster. We have higher life satisfaction. We have more rewarding relationships. We are, get this, more productive. We are more satisfied in our jobs. We tend to be. We have better physical health. We're more resilient against interest, and we tend to live longer when the people who experience more positive emotions. Okay. Kids will learn more when they have fun. And what Barbara has come up with and discovered, the most cited theory in psychology is called broaden and build. And what they've discovered in the lab is that positive emotions broaden our own cognitive perspective and build resources. So what happens is it's this upward spiral. The more we broaden our own perspectives, the more we are able to, the more we build resources, the more we build these resources, the more we experience positive emotion and so on. And it can act as an antidote to negative experiences. So we bounce back faster. The body and mind regains its balance, flexibility, and equilibrium faster after a negative emotional experience. Okay, so think about it. In terms of our definition of ADHD, positive emotions are interest incarnate. And interest is one of the positive emotions. So interest moves us to action. All right. Now, we have to have that powerful intention to guide it, because interest can move us to a video game, can move us to kitten videos, can move us to porn. So having that powerful intention is critical. And that's why I shared with you the I model. Okay. All right. The next one is engagement. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi articulated and studied after working with people who are highly creative. He articulated this concept he calls flow, and this is when we go into deep focused attention. There's a loss of self-consciousness, and we tend to merge in with what we're doing and that object of our attention and that deep sense of flow. Now, ADHD, engagement, and flow are really powerful sources of interest that allow us to inhibit our distracting impulses and ignite action. However, there's a dark side to flow. And that dark side can be hyperfocus. So one of the things that people with ADHD experience, as you know, is hyperfocus. That it's very similar, but some of the research hypothesizes that it may be we're slammed into this sense of deep flow, and that flow is aligned with a powerful goal. So when you go into flow, you are going into a place of alignment. Hyperfocus isn't always that way. How hyperfocus is powerful when it is aligned. So if you hyperfocus on a paper for school versus hyperfocusing on video games, okay, so if it's not aligned with a powerful and interesting intention, it's not going to be a positive thing. And very often hyperfocus has a negative connotation to it. So hyperfocus needs a guide. Seligman suggests that using character strengths as some of those guides. How are you using some of your top character strengths? And sometime, I don't know if David did a whole thing on character strengths, sometime have somebody come do that, because it's fascinating. It's a fascinating study of who we are at our core. And oftentimes they're so essential that we don't even recognize it. We don't even acknowledge or realize that we have some of these strengths because they're so core to who we are. All right. Positive relationships. So positive relationships in research are linked with health and well-being. People who have flourishing positive relationships, it's linked to increased happiness and satisfaction with life. It's perceived, having a perceived supported link, having perceived support is linked to a reduction in anxiety and depression in stressful times. It's linked to a reduced blood pressure and reduced heart rate during times of stress. Okay, so relationships are super important. Poor relationships or lack of social ties are linked to poorer functioning of the cardiovascular system, immune system, endocrine system, and an increase in all-cause mortality. So positive relationships are important for everyone, okay? In fact, they've done some research with big data, and they've looked at Facebook posts, and they've found that you are more likely, I don't know what I don't remember, I wish I had the actual, you are 5 times more likely to have a heart attack if somebody on your Facebook page uses the F word a lot. I mean, this is the kind of things that how we are all interlinked and connected, okay? So think about positive relationships for people with ADHD. Positive relationships, first and foremost, scaffolding. Scaffolding almost always involves other people. The supportive parent that is looking for what's best in their child and helps magnify and build that up builds a confident child, builds a child that is going from a growth mindset. But the parent who is focused solely on what's not working and trying to fix the child, we're basically teaching the child that they're broken. And so positive relationships become an important part, as well as having that scaffolding. And so positive relationships boost the flourishing of somebody who has ADHD. All right. I'm almost done, folks. And then we've got about 6 more minutes, maybe less. And then I'll take some questions and we'll do some chit chat. Meaning, what we mean by meaning is basically serving a larger purpose. Meaning gives direction, organization, motivation to your actions, and when what you do is aligned with meaning and purpose, you tend to do it for its own sake. So think about the ignition problems, the getting started problems for people with ADHD. When when there's meaning to what you're doing, when there is a bigger purpose, you are more likely to do it for its own sake. Now, it is interesting, in an interesting study among nations, they examined worldwide suicide rates. And one would think that suicide rates would be linked to poverty, but they weren't. These suicide rates, when they actually did the calculations, were linked to a lack of meaning and purpose. Higher suicide rates in places like Japan, in places like Australia, because in some of these more poorer countries, family was important, or they were centered around religion, and they had purpose and meaning. So for ADHD, think about it now, serving a larger purpose of necessity implies that natural interest is involved. It ignites action, it inhibits impulses that would lead us astray, and most importantly, acts as a powerful intention to guide our choices of actions. But it has to be authentic. You cannot make it up. It has to really have meaning for you. Okay. Finally, achievement. When we talk about achievement, achievement builds flourishing through success and mastery. As we start to accumulate successes, these successes become reference points that build our belief in our own capability, engenders hope, and encourages us to continue towards what we want. Think about that with people with ADHD. We have memory issues because we're not paying attention to what's working. We're not paying attention to what our strengths are. We're not paying attention to what we can do. And so for our ADDers, we need to remember to mark the successes, to shift to a focus of positive understanding of what we can do and how we do what we do in what situation. And as we shift that focus to pay attention to what is working and successes, we'll then be able to take that self-confidence into new experiences. All right. And continue to build that self-confidence. All right. So for those of you who are interested in doing this, I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations, and then we're going to go into a Q&A. One of the most basic and yet simplest and yet most powerful positive psychology exercises is 3 good things, or it's called 3 blessings exercise. Super simple. The effect of this exercise for just doing it for a couple of weeks has months worth of value. And if you continue it, it extends that value even more, and it in terms of optimism and increasing positive emotion. And it's basically this: at the end of your day, have a book by your bed, a journal, and write 3 good things that happened and why they happened. That's it. 3 good things, why they happened. That's all. But do it before you go to bed. And make sure that you include why they happened. Personally, when I coach, I add one other thing: 3 good things, why they happened, and what was my role in this. Okay. And so that's an exercise that I challenge you to do it. I challenge you to do it for 2 weeks and see what it does to your mood, to your relationships, to what you notice in your life. The second thing is for parents and families. I know we'll probably talk about this in the Q&A if there is any, focusing on strengths for your kids. There's a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it to everyone. It's called The Strengths Switch by Leah Waters. And it is literally a book designed on how to magnify the strengths of the family and the strengths of the kids. It is transformational, in my humble opinion. All right. So well, look at that. We said 5 minutes to 9, Ellen, and it's almost 5 minutes to 9. So and that, my friends, is why I have a time timer. All right. So now if there are any questions, or if you just want me to get the hell off stage, I'm okay with whatever you guys would like to do. So there you have it. Let me see here. I don't know. Let me turn this, close this. Are there any questions that anybody has? And Ellen, I don't know how we do this.
So we can ask people to put their questions in the chat, or if they would like to actually speak, I can unmute them. Or they can, I think they can unmute themselves. I'm not sure.
You can if anybody wants to speak, we can raise their hand under the reactions phase. I think you can raise your hand. And here's from, can I give an example? Let's see here. What was the title of the book, please? The title of the book was The Strengths Switch by Leah Waters. Could you give us an example of how we might apply this theory for an elementary age child? So I'm going to point you in the direction of the strength switch, Lori, because when we're talking about an elementary age child, we're talking about with children with ADHD in general, we're talking about a developmental lag. So depending on how old the child is, we're looking at maybe 3 to 5 years younger than their chronological age. So it would vary based on the child. However, noticing and magnifying something that they did well and teaching them how to articulate it. Wow, Sally, I look at that. You just did something. Let's say we're magnifying kindness. Sally, you did something so kind. Wow, look at that. Kindness is a real strength for you. And that, again, the more you study strengths, the more you learn about them, the more you can start to magnify what that looks like. That's a weak example. Again, I'm going to put you encourage you to read the strength switch. Any other questions?
And thank you for elaborating on that. I was also thinking about how to apply this notion of intention to a child who might not be able to think as abstractly. So I'm not sure if you have any kind of like general recommendations for that. I
don't. And the reason I don't is I don't, because you're absolutely right. It's that we're talking about a developmental lag. I think the key is helping them articulate what's important and what it is that what they value, like the same thing that you would do in teaching a child how to have values and how to be we're part of a bigger community and things like that. That would be that intention. Or for example, an intention of, I'm not a parent, I will tell you that, but my thought would be that even teaching them the word an intention, like what's important to you, what is it important, what is important to you, and why is that important? Because even a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old can tell you why that's important.
Right, like having their peers like them or something like that. I mean, there's definitely things that children value. We just might need to like dig in to see what that means for them.
Exactly, and being able to articulate. I'm going to point you in the direction of the character strengths. Are you familiar with the character strengths?
I've probably been exposed to it, but I'll have to look back at it again.
Look back at them, because they're for little kids. We all have all 24 strengths. So look at that list of character strengths, and if you can start using that language or looking at what those strengths are, you'll notice them in your kid. And that's the whole thing about what this book talks about. Is it talks about, you will know, you can spot if you look for it. One of the first things I do when I work with a family is I say, brag to me about your kid. because you will see it even if they won't. So you start giving them the language. You start sharing with them how, boy, you really are a leader. You really are, like, you bring everybody together, or you really do. You value close relationships. Wow, that's a really powerful expression of love. Boy, you did something really kind for your friend. So, you can, like, I want my friends to like me is really about valuing close relationships and being able to give and receive that kind of is the definition of love. And then the expression of that is kindness. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks. Any other thoughts or questions? I've bored you all to death.
So I actually started to think about, this is Ellen. Hi. I actually started to think about, we talk about giving our kids positive feedback. And I've been thinking about how we want to specifically give them feedback about their efforts, as opposed to, oh, you're such a good boy, as things that tend to be general, or good job, And now I guess what I'm thinking is that for me, thinking about the character strengths kind of broadens the kind of feedback that we can give our kids, and makes it not about you got 100 on the test, but about who they are as a person. And even putting in effort, I can't remember all the 24 strengths.
I have them here. They're a cheat sheet.
I want one of those.
My cheat sheet.
So with that in mind, we have a lot of people who are married to ADHD, not just have children with ADHD. So how do you see this becoming part of, or the impact on, the marital relationship?
So it's a great question. I think the first thing that's most important is an understanding of what's going on, understanding of the unique brain wiring, understanding where our stimulation goes. So we all make up stories. We all decide what things mean. And if you don't understand the mode of attention and where the attention goes of the ADHD spouse, we can make up stories around, oh, well, that partner doesn't care for me. That if they really did, they would try. They'd pay more attention to me when we're out to dinner, and if you go out to dinner with an ADHD spouse, the chances are in a busy restaurant, they're going to be like, they're going to be all over the place. And it's not because they're not interested in you or not interested in what you're saying. It's because novelty will win out, and we will get our focus will go. So first and foremost, it's understanding the brain wiring. Second, I would encourage you to get a couples coach who can help translate what's going on with the ADHD. Now, if you're married, there's obviously something that you fell in love with. So there's something else there. There's something else that's powerful, that's wonderful, that's strong, that's kind, that's loving, whatever it is. Those are the strengths. The more you can magnify those strengths and live in those strengths, the more it'll take up space for the weaknesses. You're probably going to need some scaffolding around the weaknesses anyway, but the most important thing is communication and understanding, and it's both of them. One of the things that I see with couples more often than not is that the ADHD spouse doesn't want to acknowledge the ADHD because of the whole concept of that if I do, I'm broken. And recognizing I'm broken, then I'm going to try and push away a side of myself that is incredibly important to understand, because it is also, in some cases, in some situations, a superpower. I don't know if that answers your question. Am I going in the right direction with what you were asking, Ellen?
I think it's a bridge. I feel like it's a bridge in some ways to thinking more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the understanding how the brain is wired, and that there's a memory issue where we don't tend to remember our strengths, that can bring us, that can cause a lot of strife in it because of I'm not making sense on this one. I'm just going to quit while I'm ahead in that moment.
I think Margie was asking a question.
Margie?
Yeah. Can you read it?
Uh-huh. That's a great, if the brain stimulation is negative, it ramps up. How can it be diverted and interrupted? Really great question. So that's about emotional intelligence. That's about recognizing and being able to name the emotions. We oftentimes, as ADDers, are flooded. So we hit the emotions hit fast and furious. So we have to know, the trigger points. What are some of the trigger points that can trigger that emotional upheaval? Once that emotional train has left the station, it's difficult, if not impossible, to bring it down. But if you can recognize some of the signs of where that's coming and how that's coming up, where you're starting to get where the flood is starting to begin, you can actually divert into another, have a plan to divert in another direction. But the first is you have to recognize it. You have to be able to recognize the signs, and you have to be able to break down situations where that emotional flooding can actually is more likely. So if going to the in-laws for Thanksgiving and they always criticize what you bring for dessert, that triggers you, then you need to actually be able to prepare when you're not triggered and practice it. So when you are have an emotional upheaval, when you are calmer, go over that situation with a trusted other, with a coach, with a friend, and think through what happened, what triggered it, and where it landed in your body. Because the first is to start with the body, to be able to name it, and then get into, and not for nothing, get in touch with your breath. Does that help, Margie?
Well, I was actually asking whether there's something that someone else could do when the flooding is occurring in someone else.
So if the flooding is occurring, if the train has left that station, it's keep them safe in that moment. And once they have, nothing cries forever, nothing screams forever. And once they are out of it and they are able to calm and get in touch with their breath, then help them to go over it, do exactly what I just said, go over it, be able to notice what was going on, what triggered them, address the trigger if possible, and practice. Getting mindfulness, getting in touch with the breath, those are all things that are incredibly important. Now, if we're talking about a kid, if we can somehow distract them, that's really valuable as well. Distract them with something high interest. I was at Disney World, screaming, yelling, 3-4-year-old, the what is it, the thing that goes around, the train comes around, and monorail. The monorail comes around, and I was holding him, and he was going, and I said, "Is that orange or yellow?" And in the midst of his chase, he goes, "Not orange, yellow." And then we started having a conversation. That's a pattern interrupt. So if you can do a pattern interrupt where you can actually divert them, it's kind of like a slap in the face. Do not slap your child in the face, but it's kind of like that like direct, like, what? Oh my God, it's snowing outside. It's snowing right now, and it's June. That's a pattern interrupt where it jostles them. That's one of the things that you can do depending on who you're talking about. But the most important thing afterwards, when things are calmer, going over it, noticing what happened, practicing when they're calm, how they would like to have handled it, and get that practice, because that over time will build a new pattern. Unsatisfying answer. Keep them safe. I know. But that's what it is. That's the truth. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
So just to take off on that a little bit, unless anybody else has a question. As the spouse of someone who's ADHD, who gets riled up or wound up or triggered, whatever language you want to use, I think you're making the assumption that there's a willingness to talk and have self-awareness after the fact.
I am.
Big assumption, Roger.
I am. And if you have somebody who's not willing, then you have somebody who's not willing. You know, I know that's a difficult thing. Yeah. And herein lies the problem with seeing ADHD as just a medical model or a deficit. Again, it puts us in that place of I'm broken, and that is going to create resistance. And somebody if you have a spouse who's not wanting to talk, they don't want to acknowledge it because they're broken. So yeah, I'm making that assumption, and I want that for you, Ellen. I want there to be partnerships where people talk. I really do. I'm seeing that there's Carol has put a question in the chat. So how would you suggest approaching an academically talented, arrogant 20-year-old, only recently diagnosed, to accept and embrace solutions? Carol, I don't know what you mean by accept and embracing solutions. What do you mean by that?
Hi, how are you?
Good, Carol.
Thank you for your terrific presentation. I just thought it was really insightful and very, very helpful to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just find that briefly in a nutshell. So my son's at college, his first year. He had been seeing a therapist the year before who said, gee, do we want to look at a neuropsych and do some evaluation in terms of ADHD, which indeed was confirmed. So, but he's so full of himself and hyper resistant to everything that you said about the hyper focus, et cetera. I've attended a number of the CHAD meetings as a result of the neuropsych, that indeed this may be an avenue for us to get some information, but he's highly resistant toward getting any information. And, I'm just plugging along, trying to employ many of what the strategies you had suggested, but, and the idea of a life coach or someone along those lines to just help him to kind of see where he's bumping into walls of sorts, would be helpful. If at all you could, just give me some suggestions about how to breach it. I mean, I've been very, very careful not to overstep.
Sure.
But I also feel like he's, he needs so much more than what he's really availing himself to right now.
So here's what I would suggest. I would not suggest that you do broach it in terms of ADHD.
Okay.
At least not initially. That you would focus, again, take it on the take it on the positive.
Yeah.
Help him to, I mean, help him articulate, say, you know, I want to give you some support to really skyrocket what it is you want. Tell me more about
Right.
tell me more about what you want. Tell me
Mhm.
more about what is really important to you.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what you really love about what you're doing,
Mhm.
and tell me more about what you would like to have happen. I mean, get him to paint a beautiful picture,
Okay.
and then ask him, you know, you may not be the person to ask him this. I mean, mom may not be the one, because
Mom is not.
mom doesn't know anything. I know, I understand. But from that perspective, then, you know, having somebody, what's getting in the way of you being all you can be, you
Yeah.
skyrocketing your potential?
Mhm.
What is it?
Mhm.
What's doing that? Hey, there are coaches who actually specialize in human potential, to help people, maximize their output and effort. I know a couple. There's this great coach, Andrea Elram. She's fantastic.
Okay.
That would be I mean, I know Andrea.
Uh-huh.
I know she works with young adults as well.
Okay.
And there's a host of coaches that work specifically
Right.
with college age kids that I think would be great. And
I like that suggestion about just simply taking it from an observational point of view. Hey, what really floats your boat? What are
yeah,
you really interested in? You're home, it's summer. What is it that you want to do? What's, to kind of open it up and not put it in the box of ADHD, which makes perfect sense.
the more we magnify what we're
Yeah.
moving towards, the
Mm-hmm.
more we want to move towards it. We don't want to we don't want to, look backwards. Moving towards a goal versus moving away from something else, like I want to get out of this crappy job, is
Mm-hmm.
not going to get you moving. I have a vision where I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
doing XYZ. All of a sudden now things orient. What you focus on, your brain orients around. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an important thing. So helping him to do that, and then in sharing that you would want to support him in whatever he needs, and he may need to fall on his ass.
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet.
Oh, Roger.
Ellen.
Wow. This has been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking a lot about the character strengths and how to integrate that into my friendships, my relationships, and my work with people.
I'll give you just this recommendation. This is incredibly people friendly. It's not an academic book. It is meant for the general public on strengths, and it's called The Power of Character Strengths: Igniting, Appreciate and Ignite Your, what is it? Your Positive Personality, by Ryan Nemec and Robert McGrath. The Power of Character Strengths. It's a fantastic book. It's available on Audible. And it will give you a good understanding of all of the different strengths. And then, have a coach help you work through them, because they're fantastic. They're really, really, or a positive psychology practitioner to help get you involved in them. And I didn't mean that just for you, Ellen. I mean for everybody. I really highly recommend this.
Well, thank you. Thank you
You're very
so
welcome.
much. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I hope that this was, a learning experience for you. It certainly was for me. And I hope we see you next month with Brendan Mahan, who's talking about the wall of awful. Interesting concept. Really, you have to come and see what we all do, ADHD and not, to make our lives harder for ourselves and getting in our own way. So I hope you come. Also, I hope any of you who are not members of CHAD, which is a national nonprofit organization, please join CHAD. It's not all that expensive. And if you could please list Bergen County CHAD as your affiliate. It gives us a little bit of money, and we can use that money to support what we do. So thank you so much. And I hope we see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.